Welcome to Module 5, the analysis portion of sugar. Of necessity, this will be the longest module because we'll go step by step through language sample analysis, or LSA. And I have some rather bad news. You may want to watch this module more than once. On the first viewing, just watch and listen. On the second, use one of the samples provided on the website or one of your own. Stop the video at each step. Perform the analysis on the sample and then return to the video for the next portion. If you haven't done so already, you might also want to stop the video now and download the Sugar Procedures handout or the Module 5 PowerPoint handout, which will enable you to follow along more easily instead of frantically taking notes. Much of what we've said in the previous module may be different from what you've done in the past. At this point in the LSA process, we have a transcript of the child's robust 50 utterance sample. Now, hopefully, you'll see why we've asked you to transcribe your sample in a certain way. Collecting a sample from a typical child takes less than 10 minutes. Transcription, as explained in Module 4, can also be accomplished in less than 10 minutes. Once you've learned the sugar analysis process, you'll find it equally brief. From years of teaching language sampling, Stacy and I have collected thousands of questions about the process. We've compiled a list of the most frequently asked questions. If you consult the list, you'll most likely find answers to some of your own analysis questions as you go. Are you ready to analyze? Let's go. Before we begin, just a quick check of your sample to make sure that you've followed the modifications mentioned by Stacy in Module 4. First, we only type what the child, not what the adult, said, and with no embellishments. If a word or a bound morpheme was omitted by the child, we do not add it in. That said, we do type pronunciations such as n for ng and gonna and wanna in full. This does not apply to contractions, which are left as contractions. Finally, no fillers, disfluencies, or repeated words unless these words are for emphasis. Yes, this takes a little getting used to, but you'll see why we do this once we begin analyzing. One more thing. Let's identify some computer keys you'll need before we begin. You'll need all the keys highlighted in this slide. The letter keys A, C, and V, which will be used with the Control key. And you'll also need the Enter key and the space bar. In addition, make sure that the toolbars at the top and bottom of your screen are present. Now you're ready to begin. Most likely, you have each utterance numbered. Your computer sees these numbers as words, so we need to turn off this function. This is really easy to do. Highlight the entire document by pressing Control and A at the same time. Go to the toolbar at the top of your screen. The number function should be highlighted. Simply click on this function and all the numbers should disappear, leaving you with just the utterances. Unfortunately, if you didn't use the numbering function originally when you transcribed your sample and instead insisted on putting in your own numbers, you'll need to take them out again by hand. Listen carefully. After you remove the numbers individually, save the sample and open it again. We can put the numbering function back in by doing the reverse process of what we said in this and the previous slide. If you do need to do this, save the document afterwards. And then delete the numbers using Control A and turning off the numbering function. The reason for this will become clear as we proceed. Now, we're all on the same page and ready to go. Go to the toolbar at the bottom. Your word count should be there. That's total number of words, one of the 4 sugar metrics. If this was a real analysis, you'd want to record this value to add to your diagnostic report. 1 metric down, 3 to go. That was easy. Now we're going to count morphemes. Your computer doesn't know the difference between words and morphemes. So we're going to use the same process we did for counting words when we count morphemes. There's a lot of information on this slide. Don't try to copy it all by hand. All of this information is in the sugar procedure handout and in the PowerPoint handout. As mentioned, both are available on this website. You can refer to these handouts as needed when you try your own analysis. Stacy and I began with Roger Brown's method for counting morphemes. We did make some changes, and we think we had good reason to do so. Brown was studying language development in 3 children who were 2 years old when he began. You might recall that by age 4, MLU had lost much of its initial growth. Stacy and I decided to enhance MLU by making a few changes. When we did this, it was suggested by other professionals that we call the resulting value MLU sugar or MLUS to distinguish it from Brown's MLU. Count as 1 morpheme all the items listed on the left. Most likely, these items are familiar to you. Unfortunately, if not, I don't have time to explain the rationale for each one here. We suggest that you consult Brown's book, First Language. Let's just say that Brown based his decision on the ways in which young children seem to learn and use these forms, and that we saw no good reason to change his decision. On the right are the 5 bound morphemes Brown identified: possessive S, plural S, third person S, regular past ED, and progressive ing. When each is added to a word, it results in 2 morphemes. If you're wondering what happened to Brown's other guidelines, hang on, we'll deal with those in the next few slides. Here are some of the modifications or additions that Stacy and I made to help MLU become a more viable measure with older children. As you'll see in Module 6, and you'll just need to trust me until we get there, unlike MLU, MLU sugar continues to grow vigorously through early elementary school. Okay, here are a few of the rules, either changed or added by Stacy and me. In sugar, we count each word in a proper name, because children know by age 4 or 5 that Uncle and Dave are 2 separate words. And we count as 2 morphemes each contraction, including can't, don't, and won't, which Brown said to count as 1. Don't confuse yourself with who said what. I only mention Brown as a contrast. Simply remember, any contraction will be considered to contain 2 morphemes. Finally, Stacy and I added some other bound morphemes that I had noticed children in the 175 samples colleagues and I collected in a pilot study. These are on the next slide. These are the additional bound morphemes added by Stacy and me. Don't try to copy the list. It's repeated in the sugar procedures or in the PowerPoint handout on this website. Are there other bound morphemes we could have included? Of course. We chose the ones that occurred most frequently in the 175 samples I mentioned collecting in the initial module. While the list seems long, once you get used to counting them, it will become second nature. Be thankful. A full list of English-bound morphemes, single-spaced, would go on for about 3 pages, so this list isn't so bad. You might have a favored bound morpheme that we omitted. If so, we're sorry. Stacy and I, with the help of other professionals, negotiated over which ones to include from the most frequent in our pilot study. Of course, reasonable people can disagree with our decisions. But if you go out on your own, the sugar norms, and there are norms, won't be relevant. With these guidelines in mind, we're ready to begin counting. To do this, go down through your sample, adding a space between each bound morpheme and the word to which it's connected. So, for example, the word bunnies becomes bunny and s or s. Don't worry about the leftover pieces. Your third grade teacher is not checking your spelling. We're simply helping the computer to count morphemes. In the example, you can see how an utterance might look when you've added spaces. Because I'm is 2 morphemes, unhappily is 3, and married is 2, the utterance has 7 morphemes. With our apologies to happily married couples, this utterance illustrates how an utterance will appear once you've divided it into morphemes. When you've separated all utterances in this way, go to the word count on the lower toolbar. This is now your total morpheme count. To calculate MLU sugar, simply double the morpheme count and add 2 decimal spaces. Often this can be accomplished in your head. In the example on the left, 327 doubled is 654, resulting in an MLUS of 6.54. Wow, that was easy. Make sure when calculating MLU in a diagnostic that you record this value before going on. Although we've given you more bound morphemes to remember, we've removed decisions about other morphemes. Simply follow the sugar guidelines and don't break into a sweat trying to decide if a word like into or outside is 1 or 2 morphemes. Of course, you will need to look at a word like silly and rationally decide that separating it into sill and e leaves you with a meaningless sill. In other words, silly is 1 morpheme. In contrast, funny and bubbly are 2. 2 metrics down. We're now going to pull out of this document so we can calculate the metrics for words per sentence and clauses per sentence. Check to make sure that you've recorded the total number of words and MLU sugar. Click on X in the upper right corner of the document. Your computer will ask you if you want to save the document. This is important. Do not save the document. We need it in its original form. Reopen it again. Go to Control-A so it can highlight your entire sample, and delete the utterance numbers by going to the numbering function in the toolbar at the top, just as we did before. Your sample should now look like it did when you calculated total number of words. In fact, that value should appear again in the lower left of your screen. But we want the number of words in sentences, and all utterances are not sentences. A sentence has a subject and a verb, as in Mommy sang and the dog ate my ice cream. Utterances such as on the table and funny contain neither and are not sentences. With that in mind, let's see how sugar determines sentences. Based on the guidelines on the next slide, delete every utterance that doesn't qualify as a sentence. Remember that these are child utterances, so don't expect nice, neat, clean, adult-type sentences. Oh no, more rules! It's okay. Calm down. Hopefully this will be a review. Although a sentence consists of a subject and a verb, the verb is really the critical element. Without the verb, there is no subject. If you remember that the verb is critical, you'll be fine. Just relax, breathe, you can do this. But what if the sentence has 2 clauses or more? Whoa, one thing at a time. Right now we're just finding sentences. If you have just one subject and it's an accompanying verb that goes with it, you have a sentence. Clauses will be counted later. Sometimes we leave out the subject because it's understood by the conversation's participants. Remember that the verb is the critical element. As long as the verb is there, you have a sentence. For example, hand me a spoon is an imperative, and the subject is understood to be you, so we have a sentence. As long as a portion of the verb is present, we're good in calling it a sentence. If there's no verb at all, there is no sentence. Even though by convention we set off words such as why as sentences, when we write, we will not count them as sentences when we're doing language sampling. Some other examples are at the bottom of your slide. Once we've eliminated all the non-sentences, all we have to do is record the number of words from the lower toolbar. To calculate the number of words per sentence, hit the Control-A and restore the numbering function by going to the top toolbar. Record the number of sentences. Divide the number of words by the number of sentences. Record this value. Now we have words per sentence. Leave the numbering function on as we move on to the next part. We're ready for the last metric, clauses per sentence. With the numbering function on, locate each clause. Guidelines are on the next slide. If you find additional clauses in a sentence, go to the beginning of the additional clause and hit the Enter key. This will move the clause down and renumber the remaining sentences. Don't worry about leftover pieces of other clauses, even if they're only partial. Remember that we're counting clauses, not constructing grammatically correct leftovers. Practice items are located on this website. A sentence consists of one clause or more. The dilemma comes in determining if you have one clause or more. Like a sentence, a clause consists of a subject and the accompanying verb. Clauses may be either conjoined or embedded as shown in the examples. Don't worry about which type just yet. Simply determine if you have one clause or more. Each clause will get its own separate line by striking the Enter key. In the last example, highlighted in blue, we have I want the one you have, or I want and you have two subject-verb pairs. Thus, we have two clauses. The same method can be used with the other examples. Difficult decisions occur when you have compound subjects, verbs, or objects. While these may seem like separate clauses, for our purposes, we'll count them as a single clause. Again, Stacy and I consulted with other professionals before reaching this decision, and we based the norms on counting clauses in this manner. This slide gives you an example of what I meant by ungrammatical leftovers. By dividing the clauses as I proposed, we end up with the boy as one clause, and who's in my class is yucky as the other. Technically, the is yucky part goes with the boy to produce the boy is yucky. That's for later analysis. Right now we're just counting, and two clauses is the correct number, even if it looks a little strange. To calculate clauses per sentence, note the resulting number of clauses on your sample and divide this value by the number of sentences you counted before. You've now completed the 4 sugar metrics: MLU sugar, total number of words, words per sentence, and clauses per sentence. You did it! Congratulations! Hopefully we didn't lose anybody along the way. Was it difficult the first time through? Of course. Especially the decision-making portions, in which you must decide morpheme, sentence, and clause boundaries. No one becomes an expert on only one try. We recommend that you practice with the samples on this website and with samples that you collect from children. Once you've calculated the 4 sugar metrics, you're ready to compare them to the sugar norms to help you determine if the child in question might have a language impairment. Stacy will explain the norms in Module 6. Before I close, it would be unprofessional of me not to caution that one 50 utterance sample does not by itself determine if a child has a language impairment. Sampling is one part of a thorough language evaluation. The sum of the data from the language assessment process must be evaluated and explored further before an honest determination can be made. For example, a low total number of words tells us that the child didn't talk very much. Does that mean the child has a language impairment? Maybe she's shy, or he's having a bad day, or doesn't like me very much. It's the totality of the data that must be considered. Well, this module has finally reached its end. Now we need to make the determination of language impairment or not. I'll turn you back to the capable hands of Stacy for that portion.